All right, welcome back for Chapter 7, Lesson 5. We're going to be factoring special products. And what I like to call these like special products, these are kind of going to be like cheat rules. We're going to learn some cheat rules on how to factor some special products. Okay, so let's get started. So it says our objectives for today are to factor perfect square trinomials. Okay, perfect square trinomials, and also to factor the difference of two squares. So you remember perfect square trinomials, we talked a lot about that, we talked a little bit, I don't want to use the word a lot, we talked a little bit about it in Chapter 6, and we also talked about the, back in Chapter 6. So we're going to kind of be building upon that in this chapter. If you see here, there's perfect square, so there's this idea of square here, and then the difference of two squares is right here. So really, you are going to have to know your squared numbers, right? So squared numbers, right, what are they? 1 squared is 1. 1 is a squared number. 2 squared is 4. 4 is a squared number. 3 squared is 9. 9 is a squared number. 4 squared is 16. 16 is a squared number. 5 squared is 25. 25 is a squared number. 6 squared is 36. 36 is a squared number. 7 squared is 49. 49 is a squared number. 8 squared is 64. 64 is a squared number. 9 squared is 81. 81 is a squared number. 10 squared is 100. 100 is a square number. 11 squared is 121. 121 is a square number. And 12 squared is 144. I think 13 squared, what is that? 169, I think. And that's a square number as well. So you want to have these particular numbers memorized, because if you just recognize, if you see 100 and you're like, oh, okay, that's a square number, that's the same thing as 10 squared, it's going to make this lesson a lot easier. If 36, oh, that's a square number, it's the same thing as 6 times 6, right? So that's the key. One of the first keys is being able to recognize squared numbers. Okay, so all of those, 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, 100, 121, 144, 169. They're all squared numbers. So you want to be able to recognize those pretty quickly. And if you do, this section is going to be really easy for you. Okay, so let's first talk about this first one, perfect square trinomial. So a trinomial is a perfect square. Okay, it's a perfect square if the first and the last terms are perfect squares. Okay, so that's the easiest one to see. Okay, so remember the first and the last term. So when we have this problem right here, 9x squared plus 12x plus 4, right? So just looking at this, we know that we could solve this doing it with our little voot-voots, and we'd be taking the factors of 9 and the factors of 4, and those are going to add to get 12, right? So we have to do that whole process, which we did last section, because there's a number in front of here. But when you see something like this, also, this is the first, right? And this is the last, and this is the combination of the outside and inside, and we know because it's positive, we're going to be adding the outside and the inside together to get this term, right? So what this says is the first and the last term have to be perfect squares. So if you look at here, you know that this x squared is that's a squared, right? X times x is x squared. But 9 is also a squared number, so that works. And you look at the last, 4 is a squared number, so that's great. So these are both perfect squares, 9x squared and 4. So when you're doing this, there's kind of like what I said, a cheat rule way to do it. So you see first, this is a squared, perfect square, this is a perfect square, okay? Then it's the outside and the inside. And know that you're going to be adding, right, the outside and the inside. So you kind of have to think about, like, it says the middle term, which is the outside and the inside, right? So with this one, it's the outside plus the inside. That's how you get that middle term, right? The middle term is 2 times 1 factor from the first term, and so it's 2 times 1 factor from the first term and 1 factor from the last term. Okay, so let's see what that means. So here, if you have 9x squared, that breaks into, right, 3 times 3 is 9, x times x is x squared, so it's 3x times 3x. That's how you get that 9x squared, okay? So this says the middle term is 2 times, so there's our 2 times, one factor for the first term. So you're going to take one of these factors, so that's your 3x there. And then 4 is the same thing as 2 times 2, right? Because it's 2 squared. So you're going to take one factor from the first term and one factor from the last term, which is this 2 right there. And so this one from here, this one from here. So one from this side, one from this side, multiply it by 2. So 3x times 2 is 6x, right? 6 times 2 is 12. And so that's how you get that middle term. Okay? So there's a 2, right? Because the outside and the inside, you're going to be adding 2 things, and those 2 things have to be the same. So that's why it's the 2 times. One from this and one from that. Okay, so 3x there and the 2. And so if that's the case, you know that looking at this, it's a perfect square trinomial. So the easy way to do a perfect square trinomial is you take this and you take this. You go voot, 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 voot. You notice it's a perfect square trinomial, and then you just put 3x, 3x. You put 2, you put 2. You know both the signs, this is a positive, so both the signs either have to be positive or both have to be negative. This is positive, so you know that both of the signs are positive. And then there you have it. That is how you factor a perfect square trinomial. So the key is if you can look at this and recognize it's a perfect square trinomial, it's actually pretty easy to factor, right? But if you don't recognize it, you can still do, okay, the first, right, like we did it, is 9x squared. The last is 4. You know, 9 is 1 times 9, 3 times 3. 4 is 1 times 4, 2 times 2, right? And then for this one, it's basically you're choosing 3 and 3 and 2 and 2, and you're going like this. 6 and 6 is how you get the 12, and it's a positive 12, so they both have to be positive. That's how you get a positive 12. So you could do it this way if you don't see it, but if you really want to have these squared numbers memorized, because then if you see 9, you're like, oh, that's a squared number, that's a squared number. Oh, look at 4. Oh, that's a squared number. Okay, if I take one of these and then multiply it by 2, do I get this number inside? So 3x times 2 is 6x times 2 is 12x. So boom, perfect square trinomial, cool. I stick the 3x there, I stick the 2 there. Both the signs have to be positive or both have to be negative. This is positive, so both the signs are positive, boom. Okay, so you can kind of solve a problem that would originally be maybe a little bit more difficult if you did it this way pretty easily, just because you see that they're perfect squared. These are perfect squared numbers. So you always want to look here, right? Here and here. That's going to tell you like what's going on. And then here you have to, kind of think about it a little bit more to make sure that that middle term lines up as well. So let's look at this. So let's see here. All right. So perfect square trinomials. Basically, if you have a squared number and another squared number, and then this is, one of those and one of those, so that would be A and B. That's why it's 2AB. Basically, this is just saying you take this is your first, A times A is A squared, and your B here is B times B is B squared. And then you just, for this one, since this is positive, you're going to be adding, and this is positive, so both the signs are going to be positive. So yeah, you can just go like that. So looking at this example, so 1 is a squared number, right? X squared is a squared number. 9 is a squared number, right? It's the same thing as 3 squared. So this is basically, I'm going to take the x from here and the 3 from this 3 squared, and it has to be this. It has to be one of those and one of those. So it's got to be 2 times 3 times x. And 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times x is that number. So we know that this is a perfect square trinomial. So I can just go x and x, and then I can go 3 and 3. To get a positive number, both signs have to be positive or both have to be negative, except this is positive, so we know both the signs are positive. So we know that our answer is x plus 3, the quantity squared. Okay? And then the other one would be if you have something like this, a squared minus 2ab plus b squared, right? So here, perfect square, okay, right? So this is 1 from here would be A, 1 from here B, and you just go 2AB. Except now they have a negative there, right? So that's different. So how is that affected? Well, you know when you factor it, you're going to put AA, right? A and A, you're going to put BB. How do you get a positive number? Well, either both are positive or both are negative, but now this is negative, so you know both are going to be negative, and you have A minus B multiplied by A minus B, so that equals the quantity A minus B squared. All right, that's your perfect square trinomial. So there's 2 different options. When this is positive, that's going to be positive. When this is negative, that's going to be negative. So let's look at this example here. So we have x squared. So you know one of those factors is x. That's a squared number. 1 is a squared number. One of the factors is just 1. 1 times 1 is 1. And so for this number, it has to be 2 times 1 times x, right? And 2 times 1 times x is 2x. So that works. So this is a perfect square trinomial. It's okay if there's a negative there. We know that it's going to be x, and it's going to be 1 and 1. And then to get a positive, they both have to be positive, or they both have to be negative, but this is negative, so you know that both the signs are going to be negative, and then it's boom, x minus 1 squared. That's the same thing. So let's go ahead and look at some problems. Okay. So example 1A here states, determine whether each trinomial is a perfect square. If so, factor it. If not, explain. Okay, cool. So the first thing we're going to do is look at that first term and that last term. All right? So, and I want to see if they're squared numbers. So here, is 9 a squared number? Yes. Is x squared a squared number? Yes. So what does that break down to? That breaks down to 3x squared, right? Because 3 times 3 is 9. X times x is x squared. All right? 64, is that a squared number? The answer is yes, it is. What is it the same thing as? It's the same thing as 8 squared, right? So this middle number, what this has to be, it has to be 2 times 3x times 8. And if you look at that, just know if you multiply a number, this is kind of interesting. If you multiply a number by 2, that number is always going to be even. So if you have a perfect square here and a perfect square here and you have an odd number, it can never be an odd number. It always has to, this middle term always has to be even because you multiply it by 2. So you would go 2 times, or 3, which is 6, 6 times 8. So this middle term, for it to be a perfect square trinomial, would need to be, what's it, 2 times 3 is 6, 6 times 8 is 48. It would need to be 48x, and it's not, okay? So we can say, is it a perfect square trinomial? No, it is not. The middle term would have to be, positive or negative 48x. It doesn't matter if it was a positive 48x or a negative 48x, but it would have to be 48x. The middle term would have to be positive or negative 48x for it to be a perfect square trinomial. Okay, does that make sense? All right, cool. So let's look at this next one. 1B. Okay. So we're first determine whether each trinomial is a perfect square. If so, factor. If not, explain. Okay, so we're going to look at this first term, right? Is that a squared number? Yes, 81 is, and x is. That is the same thing as, 81 is the same thing as 9 squared, right? So it's going to be 9x squared. And 25, is that a squared number? So you look at the first and the last, okay? And yes, that is. That's 5 squared, so that's nice, right? So now it's all about this middle term. So we know that it's going to be 2 times something. So the number, whenever you multiply anything by 2, it's going to be even. Is this even? Yes, it's even. Okay, that's cool. So we're going to go one of these, so one of these, and one of these. So it's going to be 2 times 9x times 5. So I think I'm going to go 9 times 5 is 45. 45 times 2 is 90x. So it is. It's the same thing. Woohoo! This is a perfect square trinomial. So yes, it is. Okay, then we just need to factor it. So voot, 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 voot. I take this, I go 9x here, 9x here. I take the 5, I go 5 here, I go 5 here. And then what do I know? I know that to get a positive 25, both of the signs either need to be positive or they both have to be negative. And this is positive, that means both have to be positive. So my answer for my perfect square trinomial is 9x plus 5 squared. And then I could always check this by doing FOIL, right? 9x to check it. Oh, let's go ahead and check it. So we're going to check it. So 9x times 9x. Oh my gosh, how long has it been shooting like that? Oh no, that's so terrible. What a horrible thing. Oh man, how long has it been like that? Well, oh my gosh. Okay, anyways, we're just gonna keep shooting. I'm so sorry. That is so frustrating. Okay. Anyways, we're going to keep going. 9x times 9x is 81x squared, right? 9x times 5 is plus 45x. And then 5 times 9x is plus 45x. And then 5 times 5 is 25. Okay, so see, this is my first, this is my outside, this is my inside, this is my last, right? First, last, outside, inside. And see how your outside and your inside with a perfect square trinomial are the same? That's why it's 2 times 45x, right? And how does the 49x get? You get 45 because you're going 9x times 5, right? That's where they get this here, okay? Why it's 2 9x 5. That's why it's multiplied by 2, is because there's 2 of these. The outside and the inside term for a perfect square trinomial have to be the same. Because 9x times 5, that's 45. 9x times 5, that's 45x. Okay? So anyways, what was I? Okay, so this 45x plus 45x is 90x plus 25 plus 81x squared. And let's see. Is that the same thing? We got 81x squared plus 90x plus 25. Woohoo! Yes, it is. So there we go. Okay. Let's go ahead and go on to our next problem here. 1C. Oh, so upset that that video is all messed up. But we're just going to keep moving forward. So thank you for being patient with me. Okay, so we're on this one, right? Determine whether each trinomial is a perfect square. If so, factor it. If not, explain. Okay, cool. So the question is, we look at the first term and the last term, right? Is this a perfect square? Is that a perfect square? Yes, it is. That's the same. 36 is a squared number. It's the same thing as 6x squared. 6 times 6 is 36. X times x is x squared. 14. Is 14 a squared number? 14 is not. So this is not a perfect square. So not a perfect square. Perfect square trinomial, because 14 is not a squared number. Okay. All right, that is it for that one. Okay, let's go to check it out, example 1A. So I want you to determine whether each trinomial is a perfect square. If so, factor it. If not, explain. All right, here is my friend the pause dragon. Remind you to pause your device. Go ahead and work out this problem. When you get done, press play and we'll talk about it together. All right, see you in a bit. Okay, let's see how you did. So the first thing we want to look at is here. Is this a perfect square? Is this a perfect square? Yes. X squared is just x, right? Squared. What about 4? Is 4? Yes, it is. It's a squared number as well. It's 2 squared. So then we have to figure out the middle term, right? The middle term, well, we know it's got to be 2 times. So we know it has to be even, and 4 is even. 2 times one of these and one of those. So 2 times 2 times x. And that gives us 4x, right? And that's the same. So perfect, it is. So then we can just go voot, 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 voot. We put our x there. We put our 2 and our 2 there. And then both the signs, right? They either both had to be positive. They both had to be negative. This is positive, so you know they're going to be both positive. And then x plus 2 squared is your answer. So if you got that one right, awesome job. Okay, let's do a couple more examples. So I want you to try to do, check it out, 1B and 1C. Okay, let's see how you do. Let's see how you do. Where's my friend? Here's my friend, the pause dragon. Remind you to pause your device. When you get done, press play and we'll talk about it. All right, see you in a bit. You can do it. Okay, let's see how you did. So we're gonna look here first, right? Is that a squared number? It is, right? That's the same thing as x squared. Is 49 a squared number? Yes, it is. It's the same thing as 7 squared. I'm just putting them in parentheses just to show, like, you know what I mean? We need one of those and one of those, and we're gonna use the x and the 7. So for 14, it's 2 times one of these and one of these. So 2 times 7 times x. Right? 2 times 7 is 14. 14 times x is 14x. And it is the same thing. That's perfect. So we can go ahead and factor it. We're going to go voot, 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 voot. And we go x, x. We go 7, 7. We know both the signs to get a positive 49. Either both have to be positive or they both have to be negative. And this is negative, so we know that they both have to be negative. So here is our answer. The quantity x minus 7 squared. And that is it. So if you got that right, awesome job. Let's go ahead and check it, though. Okay, so to check it, what we do this. Check x minus 7, x minus 7. So our first is x times x, which is x squared. That's our first. Our outside is x times negative 7, which is negative 7x. Our inside is negative 7 times x, which is negative 7x. And then our last is negative times negative, which is a positive. 7 times 7 is 49, right? So this is our first, this is our last. And if you look, here's our outside and our inside, and they're both the same. That's why it's 2 times one of those, right? But we have to simplify that. So x squared minus 7x is minus 14x plus 49. And so if we look up here, all the way at the top, x squared minus 14x plus 49. We did it right, woohoo! Okay, on to this last one. Let's see how you did. So we're gonna look at 9x squared. Is that a squared number? Yes, it is. It's the same thing as 3x squared. What about 4? Is 4 a squared number? Yes, it is. It's the same thing as 2 squared. So now this middle term has to be 2 times one of these and one of those. And the middle term would need to be 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 3 is 12x, and it's not 12x. So no, not a perfect square trinomial, because the middle term, whoa, what was that? The middle term needs to be 12x. And, oh, it could be plus or minus 12x, and it is negative 6x. So, nope, sorry. So if you got that right, awesome job, and I'll see you for example 2 in a little bit.